losing command. I had to kick my 15-year wife out of the house and force her to sign the divorce papers after she cheated on me. Let's name her my 38-year-old wife, Maya, and I'm a 41-year-old man. We originally met at a hospital approximately 17 years ago, which is when our tale began. She was the nurse assigned to care for me when I was admitted because of an unsettled stomach. She was just beginning her nursing profession at the time, and I was drawn to her because of her warmth and additional care. She was eager to start her profession and had the zeal of a recent graduate. I had never received such great attention as I did during my 2 days in the hospital. In the hopes of receiving positive feedback on her discharge form, she offered me her number when I asked for it as I was leaving. It was the start of our adventure. Before getting married, we dated for 2 years. We are now proud parents to 3 kids. We've experienced our share of highs and lows, but until a few months ago, nothing too significant had threatened to ruin our relationship. I became aware of a notable shift in her conduct. Although she was quite active on social media, she generally gave off the impression of being distracted. She suddenly became quite interested in fashion. Her desire to refresh her clothing is fine with me, but what worries me is her increasing lack of interest in me, our children, who are now twins ages 10, 12, and 10. They have been griping lately that their mother no longer loves and cares for them as much as she once did. Since I've spent more time at home than Maya, our kids have always felt more connected to me. In order to be accessible to the children, I have put up my office on the roof of our home, where I operate a digital firm. It was an effective method for me to divide up the burden of raising children. Nevertheless, children will always yearn for their mother's presence, regardless of how much time I spend with them, and they become concerned when they perceive her increasing distance. I just heard my youngest twin daughter telling Maya that she was worried about her absence, both emotionally and physically. Maya brushed her off, believing they should not disturb her since they are grown enough to care for themselves. Although I didn't particularly like the way she spoke to my daughter, I remained silent because we usually accept one another's parenting approaches. This thing with Maya is starting to worry me a lot. As usual, she blamed her busy work schedule when I tried to talk to her about it. When someone mentions that she's stressed, that's sort of her go-to excuse, although she usually gets over it. But this time, months have passed, and she hasn't disclosed what's upsetting her. Although I am aware that her work can be demanding, she has worked in this field for 17 years, and I have known her since the beginning. I've never seen her shift like this before. We've experienced a lot, particularly since I quit my lucrative position to launch my own digital business, which left us heavily indebted. We had no one to assist us with the twins and our toddler, who was 2 years old, when they were born. It was difficult, but those experiences made us stronger as a team. Wei is the first time I've ever seen her act like Wei. When I brought it up to my best friend, he made the lighthearted suggestion that she might be seeing someone more appealing. Despite our 15-year marriage, she has never given me any reason to question her, so I don't want to draw any hasty judgments. I don't want to ruin our relationship by thinking she's cheating now that we're in our midlife. But is this a midlife crisis of any kind? Is there anyone else who has gone through something similar with their spouse? I'm just contacting you to ask for guidance. To be honest, it does seem a little strange that she would suddenly become so interested in fashion, especially given that she works as a nurse, where a dress code is usually required. Why not confront her if you were unhappy with the way she spoke to your daughter? Why don't you ask her what's going on, especially if her actions are unusual? I recognize that a 15-year faithful marriage does not ensure that one partner will not cheat, and I value your viewpoint. I apologize if my statements came out as defensive. I completely understand your perspective. I couldn't resist talking to Maya about it after reading all of your comments that raised the idea of cheating. Rather, I inquired as to whether she had affections for someone else or whether something had changed between us. My question seemed to stun her, and she wanted to know why. I described how we had all been impacted by her recent actions. She acknowledged that she had been aloof lately, but she blamed it on shifts in the dynamics at work. Maya had been helping Dr. Kia for a while, but now the hospital had a new doctor, Dr. Henry. Maya was tasked with working with both Dr. Kia and Dr. Henry as the on-call doctor. However, it was discovered that these two physicians had unresolved issues from their past. When they were first starting their careers, they dated, but their relationship ended in a painful split. They can no longer tolerate one another. They each pile on work for her in an attempt to overwhelm the other, and Maya is caught in the middle, and it's hurting her. I found Maya's explanation of her issue to be completely legitimate. I advised her to discuss it with the hospital administration, but she was hesitant, stating that she couldn't file a complaint based just on conjecture. She told me that she needed some time to come up with a solution and that she would handle it her way. I observed that Maya's life had significantly improved since that chat. She began going back to her regular schedule, which included arriving home on time, being there for the children, and spending time with me. She acknowledged that she hadn't fixed her difficulties with Kia and Henry, but she had decided to overlook work-related concerns at home when I asked her if she had. She maintained she would speak with them despite my warning that ignoring them might not be the best course of action and might cause a blow-up later. I made the decision to let her deal with things as she saw fit. Over time, I noticed that she was happier than she had been. She informed me that her workload was progressively decreasing and that things with Kia were getting better. I was thrilled to see her feeling less anxious and even spending evenings with Kia to connect away from work. Her having a vacation and hanging out with pals didn't bother me. She deserves some downtime because her job is so stressful. After that conversation, I believed our issue was handled, but over the past week, I've seen her reverting to her old habits. She acknowledged that her problems with Kia had returned to their initial state when I inquired if they had gotten worse. She got upset and said I was interfering too much in her affairs when I asked whether it had anything to do with Henry. She maintained that she did not have a lifetime connection with her coworkers, but rather a normal work bond. Since she has 17 years of significant experience and could easily land a higher ranking, better paying post at prestigious hospital, I suggested that she think about changing occupations. She did, however, voice reservations, pointing to her reputation and years of commitment to the existing institution. At this point in her career, she had no desire to change occupations. In the end, she makes the decision, and I don't want to get in the way of her professional decisions. I appreciate you hearing my worries. However, your observation that she becomes irate when I inquire about her job does make me question whether there is something she is hiding from me. Although it's a little worrisome, I'm attempting to allow her room to deal with it any way she sees fit. I had assumed that the last update I posted would be the last, but it turns out that there is more to this story. It has been a wild ride over the last 3 or 4 months. On some days, Maya acts like a complete stranger, while on other days, she is affectionate and kind. My children claim that their mother's conduct is simply erratic, and they have nearly given up on her. She would respond, as self-employed, "You don't have to answer to anyone," if I attempted to offer assistance or guidance. The experience of reporting to a boss will be incomprehensible to you. I did think about suggesting that she take a few months off from work, but I opted against it because I know how dedicated she is to her career. I realized that her work-related issues were probably the cause of her stress, and I probably couldn't do anything to alter that. She dropped the bombshell approximately a week ago. She informed me that she and other doctors and nurses would be traveling to Denver for a training program. This was the first time her hospital sent nurses for cross-training, and the trip lasted 2 days. One of the fortunate people chosen for this upskilling opportunity was Maya. Since I believed that this would be a welcome diversion from her boring routine, I was truly delighted for her. I told her I would look after the children. She appeared genuinely pleased about the trip, allowing her to concentrate entirely on her work. I offered to drop her off to the airport on the day of her alleged work trip, but she declined, saying that the hospital had organized a bus for everyone. She added that I shouldn't bother her because she wouldn't be able to take calls or texts while on the trip. I let her go because I understood. She assured me she would be home by 7 p.m. on the day she was supposed to return, but her phone was off and it was nearly 10 p.m. I made the decision to travel to the hospital to pick her up since I thought her phone's battery had died during the journey. When I asked the receptionist whether Maya had returned from her training, she was unable to provide any information. She asked me to wait while she checked with Maya's department. The receptionist answered some other questions while I waited. She eventually called me over and told me that she had been on leave for the last 2 days, according to Dr. Kia, who was in charge of Maya. She asserted that this was the information she received, but I was surprised and asked her to confirm. The receptionist informed me that Dr. Kia was busy and would take some time to become available when I asked if I could meet with her. After a time of waiting, I finally left the hospital without seeing Dr. Kia. Later, after midnight, Maya texted to report that she had just landed and that her flight had been delayed. Late that evening, she got home. Oddly, I decided not to bring up my hospital stay with her. Rather, I only inquired about her training experience, to which she responded, "Good and tiring." I got a lot of backlash after my last update because I didn't address my wife right away when I thought something wasn't right. Look, people, not everyone is up for a fight all the time. It can take a while to muster the courage. In any case, Dr. Kayan himself sent me a friend request on social media approximately a week after that happened. There is no way that this is only a coincidence. I accepted the request, of course. I kept it cool and said there was no problem at all when she said that she was busy the other day when I asked to meet her. However, I suspected there was more to this. Keen clarified that she had attempted to reach me previously, but was unable to locate me using just my first name. On that specific day, though, I gave the receptionist my entire name, which is very typical. I questioned her about why she had been attempting to contact me. At that moment, she revealed something shocking. She forwarded me a video footage of Maya and Henry being overly intimate. Maya's actions during the birthday celebration were, let's just say, that was completely out of place. King claimed to have the entire video of that evening, but the movie only displayed a few seconds. To discuss the remaining specifics, she suggested a face-to-face meeting. I agreed, of course, and the following day I met with Kayan. She revealed the information at that point. As it happens, Kayan and Henry were romantically involved while they were interns, but ultimately, their relationship ended badly as a result of Henry's repeated infidelity. Tensions increased when Henry started working at the same hospital and ended up in the same department as Maya. Kyan said that at first, she had in fact put more work on Maya in order to prevent her from taking on Henry's duty. However, Kyan recognized her errors and realized that she had been unfairly punishing Maya after Maya protested to her about the harsh treatment. Now, let's get started. Kyan chose to take Maya out for dinners and nights out as a way to make up for her previous actions. Kia, who had previously split from Henry, grew closer to Maya during this period. Kia once revealed some personal information about Henry's skill in the bedroom when intoxicated. From then on, whenever Maya and Kia got together, Maya would ask her to tell her about Henry's prowess in the bedroom. Suspicious, Kia asked Maya directly if she was interested in Henry. Although Maya initially denied it, she later acknowledged having certain dreams about Henry when intoxicated. She was clear, though, that she didn't want to offend anyone or endanger her marriage. As word spread among their co-workers, Henry, ever the slick operator, took advantage of the chance to further his relationship with Maya. Rumors about their purported affair soon began to circulate. I asked Kia if she had any hard data to support these assertions because I was obviously worried. Unfortunately, Maya and Henry's covert meeting took place in an unoccupied patient's room without any surveillance cameras, so there was no proof. However, Kia did point out that Henry was also on leave on the day Maya claimed to be traveling to Denver for a training trip. Some severe suspicions were aroused by that. Equipped with this knowledge, I made the decision to face Maya. Kia gave me the movies, and I thanked her before leaving for home. I tossed and turned all night long when Maya got back from her night shift, unable to sleep at all. I finally got up the strength to tell her the truth in the morning. She tried to brush it off as a misunderstanding right away, saying she had just fallen asleep on Henry's shoulder while working a night shift. I wasn't even discussing that episode, though. I questioned her about her time with Henry during those 2 days and the Denver trip lie. I gave her the video footage I had gotten from Kia before she could respond. She accused Kia of creating phony films to destroy their relationship and shouted at her. But I told her that another video that was going around the hospital group showed her leaning on Henry's shoulder while he was being very emotional. I pushed her to come clean by telling her that nobody was benefiting from her keeping the truth to herself. At that moment, Maya started crying and confessed. Kia told me the same narrative as Maya did, but the main difference was that Maya said Henry had approached her first and she was powerless to stop him. She made it clear that she had been faithful to me for 17 years and had never dated anyone else. She was unaware of how people were experimenting and how near they had gotten. She acknowledged that she was with Henry during the trip when I questioned her about it, and they spent their time together, well, getting personal, locked up in a hotel room. She made an effort to say it more delicately, but it basically came down to what I had assumed. She felt bad about endangering her marriage, so she called it a breakup encounter. They met in secret because Henry insisted on one last meeting even though she wanted to terminate the romance. She asserted that she had no plans to see him again and that it was over. When caught, cheaters utilize that standard remark, isn't it? However, she said that she intended to stop it even if she hadn't been discovered. I informed her that she needed to find a place to live on her own while I sought legal advice to start the divorce process. I couldn't leave because my office is in our house. Since the children were closer to me and she had been ignoring them, I made it plain that I would pursue custody of them. She would have to leave, and they would remain in our home with me. After 15 years of marriage, she pretended to be astonished and attempted to argue that I couldn't get a divorce. My answer was straightforward. I can definitely file for divorce if she can still break our promise after all these years, right? I was determined to dissolve the marriage in spite of her cries and entreaties. Mallory, who is probably a lawyer, told me that he was working on the legal documentation. Only 3 days have passed after the altercation, and she is still residing in the residence. I informed her that it was her duty to discuss the divorce with the kids and give them a developmentally appropriate reason. I told her that I would have to be honest with them if she didn't. To those who believe she made up the videos, it would be very difficult and pretty ridiculous to invent evidence. She still broke a promise that represents stability and commitment. She obviously did not understand that marriage is meant to be a lifelong commitment. Maya eventually informed the children that we were divorcing after much begging when I refused to change my mind. I was shocked when all 3 of them said they wanted to live with me right away. When I questioned them how they arrived at that conclusion, one of them said that the police had asked a friend's divorced parents to pick between their parents. My oldest son clarified that anytime they noticed problems between Maya and me, they discussed it and came to the decision that, should we ever part ways, they would prefer to live with me since I had always supported them while Mama was frequently away. The children consoled Maya, who was crying uncontrollably, by promising to come see her over the holidays. I am so proud of my kids for their understanding and maturity throughout this trying time. It proves that children are frequently more intelligent and perceptive than we realize. I asked Maya to leave our home, as I had stated. I will no longer be making contributions to her joint account, and she is free to retain the money. She's already making enough money to support herself, and there's enough money in there for her to buy a house. Regarding custody, the children have already decided that they will live with me and occasionally visit their mother. I don't mind that arrangement as long as she doesn't try to control them. I'll have to limit her interactions with them till they're grown-ups if she does. As a last resort, she asked the kids to persuade me not to proceed with the divorce after receiving the divorce papers. When they originally learned of the divorce, they seemed to be okay with it, so I asked them why they had suddenly altered their minds. My daughter said that their mother had encouraged them to ask me to think again. I called Maya and told her that she would not be permitted to see our kids if she tried to use them as a means of avoiding the divorce. She was begging me for one final chance and hadn't signed the divorce papers yet. She wished to remain married but did not request alimony. She eventually signed the documents and released me after I promised to show her films to both sets of parents. After 17 years of dating, I find it difficult to move on, but I must come to terms with the fact that she is no longer in my life. I'm making every effort to concentrate on my work and my kids' welfare. The children have handled this circumstance quite well. We're all relieved that they may have been psychologically ready for it long before Maya's behavior began to shift. Narrative 2, which won't be any less fascinating. Hello everyone. I'm a 36-year-old man who has been a dad for 8 years, and I have 2 children. In addition, I am my father's only son, and he has had a difficult health journey. Here's the deal, then. My elderly father has long struggled with kidney problems, but within the last 2 to 3 years, his condition deteriorated to the point where he is currently receiving dialysis twice a week. In the past, he handled it beautifully, but recently, he has been feeling weaker and has asked me to accompany him. As his dialysis friend, I've entered this regimen. I can't let him deal with this on his own. We have a set routine where we go to his sessions on Wednesdays for the midweek grind and, fortunately, on Saturdays, which is my day off. After taking an early leave of absence, I return to work at night to make up for lost time. They know the routine because I've been here for a good 10 years. It requires juggling, but that's life, isn't it? I wanted to share my experiences here in hopes of hearing from others who have experienced similar things. How do you all balance your career and family obligations? My boss didn't mind granting this exceptional request because he has always considered me to be a devoted and loyal worker. The true difficulty, though, arose at home with my 34-year-old wife, Avril. She got upset when she found out that I would be taking my dad to dialysis twice a week. I used to occasionally take him, and she didn't particularly enjoy it, but she never said it out loud. She was unable to control her emotions now that I've taken on this duty on a regular basis. She said there was no point in spending time with my father because he would never be impressed by me, regardless of what I did. My dad owned a merchandising company, to give you some context. He was extremely successful and had amassed a substantial fortune. He had hoped that I would take over his company, but I was more interested in technology. When my father recommended that I take business or management classes after I graduated from high school, I chose to pursue a software degree because I had a great interest in coding and software development. At first, he was okay with this choice as long as I was open to someday working for his company. But once I graduated, I started working for a reputable tech company. My father was unhappy that I had chosen to work for someone else rather than continue his legacy, so this did not sit well with him. He was pushing me to work for his company, but I kept putting it off. My dad made one last offer to me after we were married. He asked if I wanted to work for him. No, I replied firmly. He became quite enraged by this and vowed to give away all of his fortune to charity, leaving me with nothing. I was still adamant about my decision, though. You know, at that time, I was already making a respectable living. I had my own house and automobile by the time I was 29. Without depending on his wealth, I was sure I could live a comfortable life. I told him that I could make my own fortune and that I didn't need his money. Unfortunately, after that, things got worse between us. My dad was greatly affected when my mother died of a heart arrest 5 years ago. You see, I left home at the age of 17 to go to college, and then I got a job and began living on my own. My mom served as my dad's main companion, therefore her passing devastated him greatly. This was the time when our bond became more solid. I started going to see him regularly and frequently brought my children to spend time with him. When he finally decided to leave his company, he turned it over to a management trust. My parents have never been close to my wife, Avril. Avril would avoid going to see them, even when my mother was still living, claiming that they didn't get along and that my mother was too intrusive in their lives. But Avril started publicly denouncing my parents as cruel and evil when my father declared he was going to take me out of his will. I made an effort to prevent her from meddling in my relationship with my parents, but she insisted that it would affect our future, especially that of our children. I assured her that regardless of my dad's money, our future and the future of our children were safe. However, she refused to accept this viewpoint. Given the circumstances, Avril made a big fuss when he found out that I would be going to my dad's dialysis twice a week. At first, I tried to explain to her that my dad had me and no one else. Despite having an older brother, his parents had died a long time ago. He rarely came to see my dad because he lived on the opposite side of the city. Due to his illness and the loss of Mom, Dad has been feeling quite alone. I can't just let go of him. Sadly, my wife doesn't want to understand this. She has been making my life quite difficult lately. She organizes a variety of activities every Saturday, such as throwing a house party, doing a thorough cleaning, or taking the kids out, or even something as unimportant as going to the grocery store. I've attempted to explain to her that Saturdays are set aside for taking Dad to his dialysis session, so she may schedule anything she wants on Sundays. She keeps planning, though, and then berates me for being late or skipping events. My dad needs to be picked up quickly so I can take him to the dialysis facility. Hold out on dropping him off till the operation is over, and then come home to her teasing and outbursts. The problem extends beyond Saturdays. On Wednesday nights, she acts in the same manner. I had promised my boss that after I got back from dialysis, I would do the remaining work either late at night or early in the morning. However, she always manages to cause trouble. She goes out almost every Wednesday night, whether it's to see her family, catch up with old friends, or go to some strange event, leaving me in charge of the kids. I wind up balancing my work, cooking for the children, and tending to the youngest, while attempting to finish my outstanding work-related responsibilities at the same time. All of this takes place following a demanding workday and dialysis session. I am aware that this is getting rather long, but it accurately captures the challenging circumstances I find myself in. My dad sees me constantly rushing and agitated, so he has often proposed that I let him go to the center with the nurse. Even after I send him off at home, he keeps checking my watch. I don't halt for a second. I quickly rush back. When I come to pick him up, I even ask him to be prepared and waiting outside. Even though Dad is cared for by a full-time nurse and a caretaker, I still feel bad about not spending more time with him. It takes roughly half an hour to drive from his home to the center. In the past, I liked to talk to him on such drive and remember our early years. But now that Aval is making more demands, my main worry is getting home quickly. To cut down on travel time, I frequently find myself using shortcuts, speeding in traffic, and passing other cars. I don't want to ruin or terminate our trip by asking Dad to accompany the nurse because it's the only time I get to spend quality time with him. I also have some obligations as a son. I'm really finding it harder and harder to put up with this woman. It's getting worse every day. My wife is doing all in her power to dissuade me from taking care of my father. She argues that there is no chance of success. There's no need wasting time and effort on Dad because he has already taken me out of his will and given his fortune to charity. I find it difficult to understand her viewpoint. Do we live our lives solely to make money or lose money? What about people whose parents are poor or have little to no wealth? Do their kids have to leave them just because they have nothing to give? I put up with her tantrums for a few months before pointing out that she would not inherit anything significant from her own parents. Why, then, did she continue to pay them frequent visits? This infuriated her, and she shot out, "My parents did much more for me than your avaricious father. They were always there for me. They are not at all like your father, who rejected you because you didn't join his company. You have no right to compare my parents to yours since my father would never do that to me." At my house, arguments of this nature have grown commonplace, particularly on Wednesdays and Saturdays after I get home from dialysis. Now, however, these disputes are intensifying and becoming increasingly antagonistic. She used to argue with me by herself, but that is no longer the case. She is now screaming and yelling at me in front of our kids. Even worse, I've heard her criticize my dad in front of the kids, attempting to incite them against both my dad and me. I intervened because I couldn't watch this go unchecked, which unavoidably resulted in yet another furious dispute between us. In my life, Aval's clashes have become frequent. When she doesn't argue, it almost seems odd, like something is missing, and the next day she usually acts much more aggressively. Rather of yelling back or interacting with her, I've nearly given up on her. I've made the decision to disregard her, acting as though she doesn't exist. What else am I going to do? To appease her, I can't leave my father. Even if he has taken me away from his will, I don't care. My own decisions led to that conclusion. When I refused to work for him, he was obliged to give his hard-won business to a trust, which was a very painful decision for him. My dad had to entrust that business to someone else since he treated it like a child. I had harmed him, thus he had every right to disown me. Karma seems to be retaliating against me at times for the suffering I inflicted on my father. In the meantime, my father's health is getting worse. He needs help even getting into the car because he can hardly walk by himself. To save time, I used to hurry him outside, but these days, I don't mind being a little late. Before gently guiding him into his bed until he is comfortable, I go inside to help him go to the automobile. I make sure to adjust my pace during our walk because he is having trouble breathing. I take care not to go over the speed limit when I'm driving to avoid putting undue strain on his heart. It hasn't helped to rush back, so I don't mind being late getting home. Why not make keeping my dad happy my top priority since I have to cope with my challenging wife anyhow? My carefree attitude has made things worse. Aval confronted me only yesterday and insisted that I choose between her and my father. I tried to explain that my dad's condition limits his time with us and that it doesn't look like he will be here for very long. I should carefully consider whether to be with someone who will be around forever or someone who will pass away soon, she said harshly in response. The remark was quite insensitive. You know what? I told her. Given how cruel and self-centered you are to a dying man, I would much prefer select my dad than you. After packing her things, she departed. I didn't stop her. I wanted some space from her, and she needed time to calm down. I'm running the house, watching the kids, taking care of my dad, and working while she's away. I'm surprisingly relieved and a lot more relaxed now. I'm actually relieved she's not here. She sent me divorce papers the day before yesterday. Though I didn't see it coming so quickly, I was kind of anticipating it. Although I was taken aback, I secretly felt content and relieved. Instead, I didn't call her. I simply signed the documents and returned them. She didn't ask for custody of the kids, which surprised me. She obviously didn't want them, but it was the only thing that worried one. She contacted me as soon as she got the papers and screamed at me for signing them without speaking to her and attempting to convince her. It's funny, isn't it? Her mother picked up the phone and told me that rather than just signing the paperwork, I ought to have been a man and tried to make amends with my wife. It was funny. Why would I do that? I gave in to her request for a divorce. I got rid of her without any problems, so I figured it was best for me. I even brought up the fact that she didn't want her kids and had left them behind. I could keep all of my possessions, even my 2 kids, she stated. None of it appealed to her. Avril was still extremely young, according to her mother, and she didn't want the responsibility of having kids. I responded I was okay with it. Having my children here makes me happy. Even while I'm relieved, I'm concerned about my kids. The younger one in particular misses their mother. It's difficult for me to manage all the duties by myself when I'm at work, but I'm hoping I can handle this circumstance. I must admit that moving to my father's house with my kids was a great choice. I want to thank everyone for their fantastic proposal. It was a huge success. For all of us, living with Dad has been fantastic. My kids have their grandpa to play with, and Dad loves having them around. It's a great arrangement that we have a full-time caretaker who looks after my kids while my dad supervises them, isn't it? My kids are having a terrific time with their grandfather, and it brings me such delight to watch them play and laugh with their father. This was probably unexpected by Avril. She believed I wouldn't be able to manage all the duties, including raising the kids, therefore she planned to complicate my life by divorcing me. As you can see, everything is in its proper position, including my dad, the house, and my job. Without a doubt, I'm laughing the hardest. The nicest thing that ever happened was the divorce. This is devastating news. Last week, my father died quietly while sleeping. After spending time with my kids, he went to bed feeling pleased and fulfilled. He also didn't wake up again. According to the doctor, he passed away quietly. Dad was very pleased after I moved in with him, according to the doctor, his nurse, and even his caregiver, and this actually prolonged his life by a few months. Before I arrived, he was about to give up. It's always heartbreaking to lose your only father, but I find comfort in the fact that Dad had a good final few months. Although my kids are likewise saddened by his passing, they have gained important life lessons from their grandfather. They discuss how he taught them that life doesn't stop for anyone, therefore they should embrace reality and keep going. Hearing these things from them makes me feel very proud. They provide me with strength in this trying time. But there's another unexpected event. I received a call from Dad's attorney after his death, inviting me to come to his office so we could talk about Dad's will. Dad had already told me that he had bequeathed his whole fortune to the trust, and I was okay with that, so I told him it wasn't required. I even asked whether I had to leave Dad's house since I thought it might have been donated to the charitable trust. The attorney laughed and demanded that I visit his office. The members of the trust were already there when I got there. They had also been called by the lawyer. I started crying as the lawyer started reading the will. I was shocked to learn that Dad had designated me as his heir. I was the beneficiary of everything Dad owned, including his house, business, and fortune. I thought it might have happened after I began caring for him, so I asked the lawyer if this shift had just occurred. The lawyer grinned and told me that the will had never been changed and that I had always been his heir. Realizing that my dad had never left me made me cry uncontrollably. Maybe he wanted me to continue his business and heritage, so he threatened to disown me. I kept crying even after Dad's lawyer consoled me. I talked about how it hurt to have harmed my father all of his life, but I had always been important to him. According to the lawyer, my father was genuinely rather proud of me for pursuing my passion in spite of his pressure and for being willing to forego our generation's fortune in order to do so. Dad thought highly of me. The lawyer also told me that I was in charge of the company and that I could take it back from the trust and run it myself if I so desired. That's what I'm thinking of doing. With Dad's covert assistance, I did what I wanted and followed my heart. It's my turn to pay him back now. I'm thinking of getting the company back from the trust and growing it to the extent my father had intended. When I get home, I tell my children about Grandpa's will. He has given them a share of his fortune, which they will get when they turn 18. We brought flowers to his grave today and spent some quiet time there. I'm going through a really emotional moment. You know, as soon as the aunts saw the sugar candy, they came back. I started taking over my father's business and community service duties around a month following his death. I took over management of the company and quit my job to begin with. I therefore made the decision to rent out my own home. My children and I decided to live at my parents' house because they had a particular bond with their grandfather there. In addition, I have a lot of childhood memories there, so even though I've been told I'll inherit my father's multi-million-dollar inheritance, I'm hesitant to leave. My house became a gathering place for neighbors, friends, and long-lost family. But my ex-wife Avril and her parents were the most surprising guests. They sobbed as they came inside, saying they would have gone to the funeral if they had known of my father's death. My dad was well regarded by her parents. Avril gave the kids a hug and said she missed them terribly. If she missed them so much, I wondered why she hadn't gone to see them in the previous 7 or 8 months. She clarified that although she had visited our home, it was locked. What a bunch of bullshit. I couldn't help but wonder, when you discovered the house locked, weren't you worried for your kids? Did you not think to get in touch with them to see how they were doing? She didn't have an answer. Her parents added that because my father was no longer with us, we should move on from the past. While I was at work, the kids would be left alone in the house. They said we should get back together since the children needed a mother. At their urging, I laughed aloud. When she left the kids with me, they needed her the most. Since then, they've adapted to her absence, and I don't want to reintroduce her into our life. She began to cry. Her parents abandoned us, and she grasped my hands and begged for forgiveness. She said she missed spending time with the kids and that she loved me. I laughed and informed her that she valued the money my dad left behind, not me. Since that's precisely what her parents were, I didn't regret voicing my opinions about them. I wasn't about to give this woman access to any of my dad's hard-earned money because she had also branded him cruel and greedy during our divorce. I insulted her parents, and she took offense. She claimed that although her requests had previously been motivated by her love for me, she would now make her legitimate claim. She is now demanding half of my money, which is basically half of my dad's fortune, even though she didn't request any alimony during the divorce. I stated unequivocally that I will not pay her any money, even if it meant going to court. After insulting me, she left. I spoke with my attorney about this matter. He said that because the divorce was finalized a year before I got the wealth, she had little chance of succeeding. Furthermore, she is unlikely to make any claims because our kids live with me. But I should also exercise caution while letting her spend time with the kids, according to my lawyer. He cautioned that she might attempt to control them and pursue custody, possibly using them to extort money. I'm really appreciative of his advice, and I plan to monitor their communications to assist the children deal with the loss and make sure they don't depend entirely on their mother for emotional support. I'm spending a lot of time with them these days. Since I've taken over my dad's business, I have more freedom to control my personal life and well-being. I'm even organizing a trip to the Bahamas for the kids. This lavish vacation is well-deserved. It has nothing to do with squandering my father's fortune. Even before, I could afford it. Now that I don't have to balance work and taking care of my dad, I have more time to create these kinds of preparations. Since her last visit, Avril has not gotten in touch with me. She's probably busy getting legal advice so she can sue me. How do you feel about today's stories? I find the stories to be really engaging. My comment: the first story was superior. The husband avoided needless scandals by acting wisely enough.